Mr. Lincoln's Drummer, Chapter 12. I was still in Virginia that Christmas of 1862. While the 3rd Vermont bled on the snow-covered battleground at Fredericksburg, I tried to regain my strength. The chills and fever had lost their grip weeks earlier, but I had withered down to 70 pounds, and the doctors insisted I put some weight onto my bony limbs before departing the ward. I never could stand to be left out of things, and those months in the hospital seemed to stretch into decades. I had been away from home last Christmas, but Pa had been with me. Now, I had no one. The fellows I met in the hospital never stayed long enough to become friends. Jace Wheeler visited on his way back to the regiment. He had deserted up north, but the provost caught up with him and sent him on to the 3rd. I celebrated Christmas with the few soldiers left at the hospital. Most of them were victims of a measles outbreak at Fort Monroe, and the youngest was 19. I sang a few songs, but they wouldn't share a cake one of the freed slaves had baked for them, so I returned to my bed and passed the rest of the night alone. The next morning, a letter arrived from Ma, which cheered me considerably. The doctors then ordered me down the hall, stripped me bare, and started up there poking and pinching again. "He's still thin," one of them complained. "What do you expect?" I asked. "The food's terrible here." "Send him home," a bespectacled young surgeon declared. "He's right about the food. He needs home cooking more than he needs to stay around here." In the end, they did not send me home. Instead, the first week of January, I marched onto a schooner bound for Baltimore. I sailed north with 7 other young soldiers in a single cabin, but I didn't mind. The walls kept most of the chill and all of the wind out, and the ship's cook brought us hot soup by the bucket. We ate until our bowls were empty, and then we filled them up again. The ship docked 2 days later at Baltimore, and I was met by a tall, red-headed corporal. "Johnston? Willie?" he called. "That's me," I said, handing over a packet of papers. "I'm Ben Sparks," he said, shaking my hand. "Don't let the stripes fool you either. I'm just 17 myself, and I'll thrash you if you try saluting or calling me Corporal Sparks. I've never been more than Ben to anyone." "Suits me, Ben," I said, grinning. "They tell you anything?" he asked. "No," I replied, "only that I was going to Baltimore." "You are assigned to the General Hospital, West's building," he explained as he led me to a waiting ambulance. "Not another hospital," I muttered. "Oh, you're not a patient this time. The United States Army, in its wisdom, has decided all those months in the sick ward qualify you as a nurse." "What?" "That's right," Ben insisted. "You are now assigned to the hospital as a nurse." My scowl must have said everything, because Ben let me sit silently beside him on the ambulance seat as he nudged the solitary mule into a slow trot. "It's not so bad," he assured me. He didn't seem to expect a reply, and I offered none. My year in the Army had taught me that soldiers aren't really expected to enjoy themselves. Nor are they expected to think or complain. I'll admit that some don't think, but we nearly all complain. Ben proved to be right about nursing duty, though. West's building was just part of a large complex of hospital buildings, and the ward where I worked was full of soldiers recovering from wounds. There were young ones and old ones, and they were from every state left in the Union. I even saw a few from the Vermont Brigade, although none were from the 3rd. Best of all, I was paid 8 months' wages, minus the cost of a uniform. It still came to almost $90. I kept 5 and mailed the rest home to Ma. The doctors did most of the serious work at West's. After a time, Ben taught me how to change a dressing, and I helped some of the men with their food. We had a little drummer, Terrence Flynn, who was even shorter and skinnier than me. A rebel cannonball had taken Terry's right arm off, and I took over feeding him. I guess somebody will be doing this for me the rest of my life, he said sourly when I brought his dinner one day. No longer than you allow it, I told him. You've still got a left hand. You may not be much good beating a drum, but you can feed yourself. How would you know? He grumbled. Look here, I said, taking the spoon in my left hand and dipping it in the chicken broth. Little children can feed themselves, and they fall over their own feet. I've seen men in here with both legs shot off who don't feel half as sorry for themselves as you do. If that ball had lopped off your head, sure, you could holler some. But an arm? That's nothing. You've got both of yours, he noted. Want me to cut mine off to make you feel better? He grinned for the first time when I took his knife and pointed it at my arm. That would be mighty stupid, he observed. I can't grow you another arm, Terry, I told him. Nobody can. But I'll help you learn to use the left one. And until then, I'll loan you mine. It wouldn't fit, he said, but I appreciate the offer. Anyway, you don't look well enough to spare it. I did my best to puff myself up, but it was a failure. I told Terry about the months in the hospital, and he shared a frightful tale of how the 42nd New York, his regiment, lost close to 200 men at Antietam Creek back in September. Every man in the hospital had his stories, and I listened to each one. Sometimes I wrote letters home for the ones with broken or amputated hands or arms. I did it for the blind men, too, and we had quite a few of them in West's building. My penmanship was none too good, and my spelling was worse. Nobody seemed to mind, though. I offered to pen a letter for Terry, but he shook his head. I've only got an old aunt back home, and she wouldn't care, he explained. I joined because my shoeshine customers all left to sign up. My pa always said I should follow the trade, you see. By far the best days at West's were the rare occasions when visitors appeared. Sometimes a soldier's ma or sister would make the trip, and I never could decide which one was more welcome. We all saw our own mothers in those worried faces, and some of the men nearly came to blows over who got to talk to the sisters. In February, we had a whole handful of girls from a female college. I volunteered to show them around, but for once, Ben became Corporal Sparks. He escorted the pretty, freckle-faced 18-year-old from Annapolis from bed to bed while I did all the work. Aside from feeding the wounded and writing letters, I took care of irksome duties like changing linen and cleaning up. Ben insisted on tending the bloodier wounds, and he always carted off the bodies when somebody died. I'm used to it, he said, turning me away. Besides, you get so close to them. He did too, but I didn't argue. On February 12th, Terry Flynn's stump festered, and the doctors carted him off to do some more cutting. They didn't bring him back. I think they knew it was hopeless, Ben told me afterward, but with somebody so young, they needed to try. I suppose it didn't matter that he learned to use his left hand, I grumbled. I've seen a lot of men, and more than a few boys, pass through here, Ben said, sighing. Lots die. I don't see many of them smile, and even fewer laugh. You made that little fellow happy a time or two, and that merits some pride on your part, Willie. Don't stop trying to help, because you lose a man or two. Or a boy? Exactly, Ben added. I ever tell you why I stay here? I never thought to ask, Ben. Most judge I don't care to rejoin my regiment. I wouldn't blame you, I explained. Besides, you limp some. Yeah, Ben said, rolling up his trouser leg. I always thought there was flesh and bone down there, but I was wrong. Ben Sparks had a wooden leg. I never knew, I said, growing pale. Don't you tell anybody, Willie. I don't want their tears nor their sympathy. My regiment can't take me back, you see, And I won't go home and sip tea with the old ladies on my grandma's porch. I do some good here. You do too. It hurts though, I said, rubbing the moisture from my eyes, when somebody like Terry up and dies. You start worrying when it doesn't, Ben advised. When you get so hard and cold that you can look past the suffering, then you might as well be dead yourself. Everybody here deserves a tear or two from us, if from nobody else. I guess so, I agreed. You know so. I never did get accustomed to patients dying, and I tried to take everyone's minds off the sadness by sharing humorous episodes from the war. I read accounts of misadventures that were published in the newspapers, and I passed on others told to me by soldiers. Most of the men, especially the badly wounded ones, pleaded for news of the war. Ben or I would report on the campaigns after every meal. Things were looking better for the Union that spring, and we confidently predicted Richmond's fall. One of the favorite stories enjoyed by all that March concerned a band of men sent south to spy on the rebels. They were led by a fellow named Andrews, and they wound up stealing a rebel train and tearing across the countryside. In the end, most were captured, and several were hanged, including Andrews himself. 6 of the survivors became the first to receive a new medal granted by Congress. I wouldn't mind having one of those, a lanky New Yorker named Hendricks told me. Only problem is that I never once did anything brave. I got myself shot running as fast as I could through a cornfield. If I had known the Rebs were on both sides of us, I would have stayed put. Personally, I didn't give much thought to medals. I had no girlfriend waiting for me back home, and Ma probably would make me stand up in church and show it off to the fat-faced old neighbor women. They liked to pinch my cheeks, and I couldn't abide that. After I was in Baltimore 8 months, Ben brought word that I was wanted at the hospital headquarters. I suppose that I was finally being sent back to the 3rd, but when I arrived, a tallish major decked out in yards of gold braid and wearing a gleaming sword took me aside. "You're Willie Johnston, 3rd Vermont?" he asked. "My father's also in the 3rd, I explained. You might want him." "He was also in Company D? A musician?" "No, sir," I replied. "I suppose you have the right Johnston after all." He led me down the hall to an orderly room. We stepped inside together, and he drew a small notebook out of his pocket. "Tell me about it," he suggested. "About what?" I asked. "Why, the 7 days, of course." By then, the battles at Savage's Station and White Oak Swamp Bridge and Malvern Hill had been grouped together and called the 7 days. I didn't care much for that notion, and I told the major that. "Just describe what you saw, Willie," he instructed. "What you remember." I did so. It didn't take long. So much had happened since then. I did recall the heat and the dust, and I remembered the sea of dead men at Malvern Hill. Most of all, I remembered the day Mr. Lincoln came to Harrison's Landing. "The president does make an impression, doesn't he?" the major asked. "Yes, sir," I agreed. The major left shortly thereafter, but he returned 2 days later. "We have a short journey to make," he explained. "I have my duties here," I pointed out. "A replacement has been assigned. You have more important matters awaiting you." "What matters?" I didn't like the sound of it one bit. "I'll explain it along the way. First, though, we need to get you ready." Most days, I wore an apron over my shirt and ignored my tunic altogether. Tending the wounded, you were apt to get blood on your clothes. We sent the aprons to the laundry every night and took a fresh one. That way, we kept a good deal cleaner. Now the major escorted me to the bathing room. Somehow, he had assembled a brand new uniform for me, boots too. I gazed in wonder at a real leather belt and spotless white leggings. A cap with a brass eagle in front lay atop a new tunic. "Get scrubbed," the major ordered, pointing to a waiting tub of steaming hot water. "I'll send a man in to clip your hair. See he shaves you as well." Shaves me? I asked, tensing. You've got a whisker or two on your chin. That won't do. He left, and I shed my clothes. Then I climbed in the tub, soaped myself, and rinsed properly. I can't recall ever feeling so absolutely clean. I was halfway dressed when a young black man arrived. He insisted I sit on a stool and remain absolutely rigid. You the barber? I asked. That's what they tell me, he said. Mostly I clip hair for the undertakers. It's a real art, making the dead presentable. I'm not dead, I reminded him. No, but by the time you get all prettied up, you'll look good enough to bury. Don't you worry, I shave myself every morning, and I haven't cut my throat yet. I just have a whisker or two, I told him. You leave everything to me, youngster. A man's first shave ought to be a first-class job. I'll do you justice. He mixed some shaving powder and hot water in his hands. Then he spread the lather across my chin and cheeks. He put an edge of the razor to my face and sliced away my chin hairs so quickly I hardly had time to notice. He then took out scissors and trimmed my hair. When he finished, I looked ready for Easter Sunday. He left, and I continued dressing. I took great pains to make sure every button was fastened. I was reaching for the cap when the major reappeared. Now that's what I call a soldier, he declared. I'm only a drummer, I explained. Lately, not even that. I know all about you, Johnston, the major insisted. Follow me. We have a train to catch. We rode to the station in grand style. The major had hired a cab, and we traveled the streets of Baltimore like a pair of princes. The major flashed a pass at the depot, and we were admitted to the first-class car. A waiter served us platters of roast beef and boiled potatoes, and I stuffed myself. I had to pass up a slice of chocolate cake for fear my trousers would split. I paid only scant attention to the countryside outside the window, but when we stopped, I recognized Washington right away. The major and I stepped off the train in the center of town, not far from the Capitol itself. It looked grand with its new dome, but I had little time to observe architecture. Once again, the major ordered a cab. The driver smiled at me as he poked his horse into a gallop. We raced along the dusty streets, and I worried that if the cab's wheel hit a rock, all my efforts to improve my appearance would have been for naught. Fortunately, we arrived without incident outside the War Department building. I don't understand any of this, I said, refusing to climb the steps. What am I doing here? You are seeing Secretary Stanton, the major said, pulling me along. He has something for you. As bewildered as ever, I stumbled up the steps and followed the major to a small room outside a larger reception room. I could see a handful of generals and finely dressed ladies inside. There were several distinguished men in tailored suits, too. I also recognized one of the war correspondents who had visited our camp in Virginia. "Wait there, Willie," Major said, pointing to a small sofa. I stepped over and sat down. I let out a long breath and shook my head. Then I felt a strong hand grasp my shoulder. "Hello, son," a faintly familiar voice called. I stiffened my shoulders and gazed up at Mr. Lincoln himself. He wore a friendly grin this time, and his eyes were not so tired as before. "Good afternoon, sir," I said, starting to rise. "No need, Willie," he told me. "Mind if I join you here?" "I'd be honored," I told him. "You seem to have lost your stammer," he observed. "That's for the best. I had one myself a long time back, but I was determined to be a lawyer. Works against a man stammering." "Yes, sir," I agreed. I was a little nervous before. "Tired as well. Quite a thing holding onto your drum during that long withdrawal." "More of a skedaddle than a withdraw," I observed. "General McClellan wouldn't agree. He's after my job, you know." "I imagine you'll hold on to it, sir. You look the part." My own Willie told me that once. Trust us to know, sir. He's left me now, Mr. Lincoln said, frowning. We buried him better than a year ago now. Was he a soldier then? I asked. No, just a little boy. I wouldn't allow him to join the army. He had the heart for it, but his health, he died of a fever here in Washington. We've had a bad time with fevers in the army. I had a battle with one myself. You've had your share of challenges, Willie. General Smith spoke well of you, and Secretary Stanton agrees that you exemplify the spirit of all our soldiers. You have served your country well, and the nation has decided to honor you. Honor me? I asked. How? Why don't we go see? The president suggested. I think they're ready in there. I spied the major and rose when he waved me along. I entered the room with my cap on, and the major motioned for me to remove it. I did so, and one of the ladies grinned. The generals didn't. The onlookers formed an aisle, and I marched past them to where a large man with a peculiar stripe of gray in his hair waited. He read a short statement about the 7 days and told how I kept my drum when all the other drummers in General Smith's division failed to do so. He spoke a few words about my time in the hospital and congratulated me on my recovery. By virtue of the authority granted by the United States Congress, I now award drummer Willie Johnson of the 3rd Vermont Volunteers the Congressional Medal of Honor. Shake Secretary Stanton's hand, the major whispered. I almost fainted. The Secretary of War himself clasped my hand. He then pinned a strip of ribbon holding a star-shaped pendant onto my tunic. May all our citizens demonstrate the devotion shown by this young man, the secretary added. The generals applauded, and the ladies came forward to kiss my forehead and pinch my cheek. It was every bit as bad as if Ma had invited the neighbor ladies. Later, I tried to stand as tall and stiff as possible while a newspaper artist made a sketch. The correspondents fired a volley of questions, but I hardly heard them. I was glancing around, hoping the president would reappear. Has anyone seen Mr. Lincoln? I finally asked. He has a country to run, one of the generals observed. You shouldn't expect him to be here. I don't believe you're quite that important, son. I thought about telling him about the visit before the ceremony, but I knew better than to antagonize a general. I kept mum. Only when the major had us on the northbound train that night did I ask anyone about anything. Why me? I asked, fingering the medal. I did nothing very brave. I never stole a rebel locomotive. I don't know for certain, Willie, the major replied. Maybe it had something to do with the president's son. You certainly touched his heart. I like to think that when the secretary pinned the medal on you today, he was honoring all the sons of all the fathers who have served the nation in this terrible ordeal. We can't recognize everyone, so we chose you as their representative. You should consider yourself very special, Willie. I do, sir, but I don't feel like I have a right to. I probably don't have a right to wear a major's uniform, Willie. I haven't led any charges or braved any bullets. I think a man has to serve where and how his country asks, though. I do, and so will you. And if my name had been Terry or Ben, somebody else might have received the medal. But then Ben didn't carry his drum to Harrison's Landing either, did he? No, sir, I admitted. You have a lot of years left to you, Willie. When you're older, you may come to understand how important it is for a country to have heroes, to honor courage and devotion. If we can't see those good things in the midst of so much death and suffering, we may be unable to continue this fight. I believe in courage and devotion, and I have witnessed both at West's. Glance around at the men's faces when you walk among them with that medal on your chest. If they tell you to send it back, do so. They won't, though. It was a strange thing. Aside from Pa and a few of my teachers, no grown man had ever spoken so many words aimed directly at my heart. I never even knew his name either. He was right about the men at the hospital, too. "It's about time they recognized a real soldier," one of them declared. "You make us all proud, Willie." I didn't reply. Among the brotherhood of soldiers, some things were simply understood. I paraded through the ward one final time. Then I stripped off my tunic, draped an apron over my shirt, and went back to work.